it doesn't matter what the product is you're on the phone or you're talking to somebody that has a need and want. And the objective is to find what that need and
Mhm.
want is. What you're going to do, you got to put 100%, 110%, whatever it takes to get to that level because no one is coming to save us.
Do you want to take ownership of your financial future? Have the freedom to do what you want, when you want, and with whom you want? Welcome to the top, the Take Ownership Podcast, the ultimate destination for Black people who want to learn how to build wealth through multifamily investing. We believe that multifamily investing is one of the most powerful wealth building tools available to our community. Through our podcast, we demystify the world of real estate investing and show you how to use multifamily properties to create long-term passive income streams and build equity. Each episode features expert guests, real-world case studies, and practical tips tailored to Black investors. Whether you're just starting out in real estate investing or you're a seasoned pro, you'll find valuable insights and actionable advice that can help you achieve your financial goals. Join us on the Take Ownership Podcast and start taking ownership of your financial future today.
All right, fam. Welcome back to the Take Ownership Podcast. It's your man, DB. I'm here with my boy. Excuse me, not my boy, my man,
No, that's good. We
Jerome.
get it. We
Yeah,
get it.
correct that. Make that correction. We stepped away from that, my boy stuff. Here, my
I'm
man.
with it. I was gonna roll with you, man. What's up behind the scenes, man? How you feeling?
Yeah, man. Today we got a very special guest with us today. He's gonna anytime you have money in the building, right? You always gotta, step back, listen with both ears,
For sure.
as your mother used to say, right? Listen with both ears and close your mouth. So I'm
For
going to do the
sure.
same right now. So Jorge, please introduce the folks and let them know who you are.
Yes, sir. My name is Jorge Farias. I am in a one way, shape, or form looking to help anyone who's looking to fund deals. I am what's called the money. I'm part of a brokerage where we do commercial real estate, we do fix and flips, we do land, we do vertical, anything that needs money, as long as it makes sense, we're able to forward with it. So I'm looking to share some any type of content that can help. But more importantly, I believe education and action taking is going to be how we as a group, as a culture, as a team, whatever it is, get to that next level. Because unfortunately, there's so much information out there that it could become stagnant, or it's the paralysis by analysis concept, right? Like it
Mm,
just seems like it's too much. But I'm a true proponent that action taking and the purpose of education is to make moves, right? So
for
my
sure.
intent is to demystify this. It's almost like this Wizard of Oz concept that, from looking from the outside in, it is very difficult. But once you get in and you start realizing how others leverage it, then it's almost like it's my duty to try to do the best that I can to share that information and hopefully get people out of the matrix.
For
For
sure.
sure.
I
You-
think infectious doesn't begin to describe Jorge's personality, man. When we met, he was just so infectious, the energy, and just hit me with so much wisdom. So, man, we would just love to see where all that came from, the origin story. How'd you get in this space in your life?
Absolutely. So I'm gonna do like they do in the movies. It all started in 1982. So I'm originally from Los Angeles. I'm a what's called first generation, where like my parents, came here and we did all the work that it took to figure this out. But I'm first generation, so growing up not poor, but not having what everyone else had. There was like a chip on my shoulder.
Mm,
I didn't learn English till about like the seventh grade because we were all about the culture and keeping it, 100%, culture and
mm,
all that good stuff. But then growing up in that environment of the haves and have-nots and always being an outsider, both culturally and financially, I grew up with a huge chip on my shoulder because I felt like I wasn't good enough or we weren't good enough. Because every time I would turn around, I would see us
Mhm.
struggling. And then you
Right.
see on the other side of that, the proverbial railroad track, you see everybody just living a different lifestyle. So
Mhm.
I was always enamored with trying to get more because I wasn't satisfied with what we had. So as I got a little bit older, you start doing I had my first taste of like a corporate job, which was like in sales, and started seeing the potential of commission checks. And I'm thinking I'm doing well for myself. I'm in my mid 20s, at that time thinking I'm making great money. You see a comma in your paycheck, you think you're winning. And
Mhm.
then you start putting yourself in different rooms and you realize that there's people doing bigger things than what you are. And then you start realizing like, well, they're not that different than I am, or, what is it so special about them that I don't have? So it's almost like this competitive nature.
Right.
And I met an individual that was in mortgages and in single family. He was an originator. So he worked for a bank and he used to do mortgages. And he showed me one of his commission checks and it was like $30,000. And I was just like, no way. Like
Mhm.
that's impossible. Like, how do you make that much money? And he started putting me on the game and how the process works, and it intrigued me. So for almost a year and a half, I tried to get on with JP Morgan as a originator, but during that era, they wouldn't hire individuals without experience. So you had
Okay.
to have experience in the lending space. Now I was sales experience, but not in the mortgage aspect. And for I'm sure your audience and for you, you understand that every industry is a bit esoteric, right? They use language to keep
Mhm.
people out or to make it more difficult. But I was just I was hungry and I wanted to get into those five digits. When you're talking about you're making 10,000 plus on a month-to-month basis, like I need to have it. So I interviewed 7 times.
Wow.
That seventh time the interview went terrible. I thought so here, and I always bring this story up because I want people to understand that most of us see an individual that's whatever phase, whatever stage, and we see the end result, but we sometimes we fail to realize that journey.
Mhm.
And I always like to tell this story because it was not an easy process. I'm talking about 6 interviews getting declined. The
Mhm.
seventh one, I was at this, like my energy was like, you know what, man, if it does or it doesn't, it's whatever. Like I was burnt out. But I remember that this manager, she was super sweet and she was hungry. She was like, I like your energy. She's like, I can tell you're coachable. I can teach you the business. I just need somebody who has hunger. And I'm like, let's get it. So she brings in the senior lending manager into this room. And man, when I tell you the energy of this guy was incredible, man. He came in, no hellos, no nothing. And he asked me a question, man. And he was just like, how I can tell somebody is serious about the careers, they do the research on companies. He was like, who's the CEO of the company? And I instantly thought about my business professor who always said, you always look up the CEO, the
Wow.
V, and I didn't know the answer, man. And I
Oh,
was embarrassed, embarrassed. Now, again, his energy wasn't welcoming. He just came in like that. And I was just like, you know what? You're right. I do not know the answer, but I was like, the one thing that I am is I'm a student. I'll do the research. So because I am who I am, I felt like he kind of, it was a little bit of like that competitiveness. I was like,
Mhm.
the way I can tell that a leader cares about the company and knows about, like their subordinates and all that, is that they know the leadership as well. So who's the CFO? And he didn't have an answer, but he was upset. So we were both upset because he was like, I think we're done here. So he walked out. I shook the lady's hand and I started walking out. And then where I was where the interview room was, like these places are like cube farms. So
Mhm.
it felt like a half a block, like this walk of shame. And she's chasing me out and we're talking. She was like, don't worry about it. He's like, he's kind of rough around the edges, but I'm gonna fight for you to get you in here. And I was like, yeah, whatever, sure. I knew it
Mhm.
wasn't gonna be good. And at the time I remember I was calling my girl at the time, and she was like, how'd it go? I was like, it was terrible. It was no good. I was driving home, man, and 15, 20 minutes later, she gives me a call. She was like, I want to get you on board. I'm gonna have the HR person call you. We're good to go. And I was just like, whoa.
Wow.
mm,
So, and the reason I like telling that story is because it wasn't easy getting in. And it
Mhm.
wasn't easy when I got in either.
Right.
because during that era, they were just hiring people with experience. So I'm one person out of 35 people in this training class with zero mortgage experience. And when they start talking about loan to value and PITIs and ratios, and I'm just like, it's moving
Mm.
so fast that I just realized I was like, I got to get my game together. So what I did is, again, I'm a student. I take notes. I bought this book. It's called Mortgages for Dummies,
Mm-hmm.
and just started doing research, man. And within like a month, because the first month was kind of like you sit with people and you hear calls and you kind of go through the process. That second month, you actually start taking calls. By the third month, man, I was already doing 120% of quota. Like I was already getting my groove, because at the end of the day, for anybody listening to this, it doesn't matter what the product is you're on the phone or you're talking to somebody that has a need and want. And the objective is to find what that need and
Mm.
want is. We can figure out the minutia later. It's just understanding what the pain points are. And when you're dealing with mortgages, if you're dealing with fix and flips, if you're dealing with commercial, multifamily, whatever, which we're going to discuss in within this call, there's a pain point, and there's somebody either needs help, somebody needs to get out, or somebody sees an opportunity. So it's just, how can we make that happen? I know there's a
Yeah.
long-winded kind of answer,
No,
but
no, listen, man.
yeah,
Love it.
I got a whole bunch of notes, a whole bunch of stuff I want to cover because I was filled with a lot of fire stuff in there. Um, you touched on a few things. I want to try to go by one at a time. So you talked about education, how the importance of
yep,
education, and the fact that in our community we missing some of the needed education. And I'm not talking about going to Harvard or going to whatever.
understood.
Everybody can put an application, get out there. I'm talking about some of the education that's beginning to be forgotten about, right? Those that you can really acquire on a more personal level, like trades, right? Things that are a little bit, people are forgetting that sometimes some of the best things in life are the ones that you can get with someone, be an apprenticeship to that individual, learn from that individual, and get those skills. Whether it's plumbing, whether it's
Mm.
whatever it is, some of those things are starting to get pushed out of the way in favor of just go to Harvard or just go to this or something like, right? That's
Hmm.
a lot of different things that we need to be educated on, and not just that go to
Right.
and not knocking going to college or anything like that. I went to college, right?
Yep.
But it's just we starting to forget a little bit about some of the things that you can create, a good family business out of, right?
Mm.
And we're missing some of those. And then you mentioned when you got into some of these areas, you felt like you don't belong, right?
Yep.
This is something that I think all of us suffer at some point in time.
For
Some
sure.
folks call it imposter syndrome. It's like, you got the skills, you have the ability, you can do whatever, but it's like you get there and you have this feeling like, I don't know if I can do it. You have this thing in you. Like, tell me, how did you overcome some of those things?
And I always like to be transparent. It wasn't easy because it was all internal.
Mm,
That's what made it difficult. Now, there are moments where certain situations occur. Somebody might say something slick, or you can't control that. But the internal aspect of it is so difficult, because how we think, how we see, how we are is what makes our personality, and our personality makes our reality around us.
Mm.
So, and I'm all about books and adages and, like reading stuff, because I'm a true believer that, let's say, for example, Jerome is a master at this craft and he wrote a book and he has 10, 20 years experience and he put all his knowledge in the book. Why wouldn't I want to read that and absorb that information? So I've always been on that mindset of like, well, I always ask questions first to see like what you bring to the table, and there's
Mm.
something I can learn, right? So let me how I want to bring this point together is that I started reading, and I know a lot of people hate it, but it's like self-help books and like all these different things, and I started reading like little passages where you start understanding it's like a lot of this is internal, right? It's
Mm.
almost like we put ourselves in these positions mentally where I don't know if I belong in this room.
Right.
I got a suit. I mean, I bought my suit at Burlington Coat Factory, but I'm sure they bought a more expensive suit. So then
Mm.
right, right.
all these thoughts, your subconscious is hearing, and it starts believing it. And that's the crazy thing about the subconscious. And we'll talk about that as well. It's like the one thing about the subconscious, what you tell it, if it's false or true or whatever it is, it believes it.
Yeah.
So negative thoughts work the same way. You know, that's why
So,
I assimilated when I was younger. I was like, oh, no, my name is George,
right.
because I wanted to be like, I wanted to be part of them.
Mhm.
Right, right.
But what ended up happening was you start realizing it's like once you start having these conversations with these individuals, you start understanding that they're not that different than you are.
Mhm.
Now, their upbringing is different and their relationships are different. But then at the end of the day, you're like, wait a minute, I can do this too. So it's almost like you have to live in this world of disbelief, like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure this out. And for me, because I'm such a hyper competitive person, I never wanted somebody to tell me or dictate to me what I
Mhm.
can and can't do. And again, I'm such a contrarian. If somebody said you can't do it, I'll be like, bet, watch me. Let me figure this
Mhm.
out. Let me go on YouTube University. Let me go on Google. Let me read some books. Let me make some connects and
Yeah.
meet individuals at events and try to get this information. Because at the end of the day, as soon as I make it mine, I'll put my own twist to it. Now it's my
Mhm.
presentation, how people
Yeah.
perceive. But the one thing I will tell anybody that's listening, it's that over all of these different things, efficacy is the most important thing. If whatever you're going to do, you got to put 100%, 110%, whatever it takes to get to that level. Because what you don't want is to mess around and be 50% in, 50% out. Because once you start making relationships, you can sour a relationship. Or the most important thing is you could ruin your brand.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Brand management is the most crucial thing in any business, but especially in this real estate, because it's a very small niche community. And if you say you were going to do something and you didn't do it, best believe they'll
Oh,
be
it's
like,
gonna
oh yeah,
get wrong.
that
Yeah.
bald-headed guy with the beard, man, nah,
It's gonna
I
get
dealt with
wrong.
them. And so that's kind
Mhm.
of like my thing. But I'm a true believer that you got to put yourself out there. It is uncomfortable, but the only way we grow is you have to stretch
Mhm.
yourself out, right? And you do have to have those moments when you're driving home and you're like, oh, that was terrible.
Yeah.
For sure.
I want
And
to
I like
stress on
that.
all right,
Just real quick, Derek. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
like
go ahead. Go ahead.
the lack of self pity and the ambition kind of overcoming it, because you can start feeling sorry for yourself, and it just won't get you anywhere. So that ambition has to kick in, man. So I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, and it's like the last thing I'll say to that, and I know this is harsh, no one is coming to save us.
Hmm.
So you
So
have to look at
that's
you have to look
reality.
at the world in that perspective. So then that way that part of your brain triggers and it's like, all right, well, how do we get out of this mess? Or how do we
Right.
do this? Or how do I get there? I want to sit at that table over there with those
Hmm.
because you can tell those are the movers and the shakers.
Right.
And
My
then
buddy, we make our own table, right?
that's right.
Um,
Hmm.
you
I
know,
love it.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned, which is the fact that you interviewed 7 times, right? And it goes back to the point that you were making. Everybody sees the end, right? Like whether it's YouTube fame, movie fame, money,
Hmm.
whatever, we always get to see, oh, look at this guy. He's making such and such. He's doing such and such. But nobody remembers when this guy was making the corniest stuff on YouTube, but nobody watched it. He had 1 view,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Had 2 views. And then a month later, maybe he had 3 views. He was happy, right? He didn't have any monetizing happening. 10 years later, this guy's blown up. Like, well, he came out of nowhere. Right. He's got a collection of, 1,000 videos, and maybe
Hmm.
10,000 more that never made it, and, light of day.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah, you're right. It's about showing up every single day,
Hmm.
putting in 100% all the time. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it's like it's the reality. You just don't get to see the beginning hustle.
Well, it's also, and I'm sounding like my dad now with like age. It's like social media plays such a crucial aspect of it because the end result is what you see in those 4 to 10 second clips.
Mm,
DB
Hmm.
pulling up in the new Range Rover, Jerome pulling up in the Lambo,
right.
but nobody remembers, like you said, where you were out there working 10-hour days and then working on your business at night. But for us, like just like in living in like we call first world problem is nobody cares about the journey,
Hmm.
right?
It's
Like nobody
true.
cares
It's
about
true.
the struggle. Like you need, and I think that's the part is like you have to understand that you have to fall in love with the journey because the journey is where you grow. That end result gets you, yes, the commas and the checks, you get the material things, but it's that reflection of like, man,
Hmm.
look where I came from, or look at who I
Right.
brought along, right? Each one teach one,
Mm,
that type of mentality. And I think that's at this point where we're at now, I want to say pre-COVID, maybe 10 years ago, I started seeing a shift where people are more open to no longer gatekeeping, but trying to get people involved. Because
Mm.
it's to me, it's like this, like there's a book that I read, it's called like the blue ocean concept, where there's enough money for all of us to eat. So like say Jerome, you do like the bird method, and somebody does wraps, we all can still be at the same table. It's just a different variations of it. And back in the day, I used to feel like, no, there's too many of us in here already. My bad. Like I'll get you on the next one.
Mm.
But I think COVID and like this younger generation started realizing the power of, like you said, creating your own table, making your own money, creating your own path, where if it's e-commerce, if it's real estate, if it's whatever it is, like people are doing their thing, which is really cool to see. Because I'm 41 and I come from the era, it's like, get a good job, put in the time, get
Right.
that
Mm.
promotion that's less than the cost of living, get that little title that makes you feel a little bit more important. And when you become 50, 60, you could potentially get something at the end. And that was the matrix. That's what it was.
Right.
And I'll get off on a little tangent, but I'll tell you when I had my wake up moment. When I was working at this company that I was talking about earlier, there was a gentleman that I used to work with, young guy, super cool guy. I helped train him, so I kind of used to keep a good relationship with him. And I remember one day I was walking, the sales floor, and I was asking, I was like, "Hey, where's my guy at? I don't see him no more." And they were like, "Oh, he passed away." And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, really?" And he was like, "Yeah, he just passed away like 2 days ago." Man, when I tell you
Wow.
that they cleared his desk and had a new body in there within 3 days,
Wow.
Mm.
they didn't even send an email like, "Hey, we had a team member that passed." It was just a number. And that's when I
Mm.
was just like, this is the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 You're a commodity here. And
Right.
everything kind of shifted for me at that point, man.
I was I was actually talking to my wife the other day. Had somebody who's she got his job, and the job was good, at least from my standpoint, right? And then next thing I knew, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting another job." And she was about to leave the other one. I was like, "But you've been there for a while." And right there, I caught myself because I still have a little bit of that mentality of, well, you want to have longevity in some places and stuff like that, but you also have to realize, as Chris Brown said, these chicks ain't loyal. I'm telling you, the reality,
Not at all.
corporate America is not loyal.
No.
And
Mm.
I like my job. I like what I do. I like some of the, I love the people I work with, but I also realize it's a business.
Right.
And just like if I have a business, which I do, and in order for that business to survive, I need to fire, John. That's what it's going to be. So
That's
like I
right.
said, I call myself really quickly. I'm like, yeah, go ahead, do that. Because
that
just like
that
they're
that
not
that
loyal,
programming that we have, it's hard to
Mm.
break. It's
it,
it, it's ingrained in us, man.
it's they start them young, start from kindergarten, start already
Right.
teaching you the routine of what you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
get yourself ready to be an employee. That's just
Yeah.
Get in
you
line.
know,
Yeah.
Man, I remember somebody told me this, of course, after student loans, and I graduated school, but they were like, he said, what is the purpose of an education? I was like, oh, I went through this whole spiel. He was like, no. He was like, if you notice that most people, whatever degree they get, they typically don't work in that field. And I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, you're right. He was like, a degree is to show an employer that you can show up every day and stick on the project, which is, earning your degree, and get a paper showing that you're able to do that. So they're molding you to be that
Mm-hmm.
40-hour guy or gal.
that's a
So,
very interesting
right,
perspective. Yeah.
but here's the thing though, like, I got my degree, so I'm not talking bad about education, but the thing about it now, and you said, is like, I have a job and I have my business. And that's what it's about now. Is, yes, this takes care of the bills, this takes care of
Mm-hmm.
this, but this is how I create wealth.
Right.
This is what I can build for my children. This is what I
There
can
you go.
build for my friend. And that is the switch that I think people are either getting more comfortable with,
Yeah, I
or
think so.
they're just gun ho with it. They're like, but here's the drawback too. People just quit their jobs and they go into this business, and again, there's pros and cons
You,
to all of that.
you gotta go prepare. You can't just wake up one day like, yeah, I'm tired, so I'm leaving. No, you gotta have some stash. You
And
gotta have
start
a
my
good plan. You
business.
gotta have a good
Yeah.
game plan.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Listen, we can go on with this one forever
All
because
right. Yeah, my
that's
bad.
just
My
the
bad.
reality of what
Yeah,
we
yeah.
face. That's the
Mhm.
reality. But let's jump in a little bit into your business so that we can, get the folks. We got their mind ready. Let's feed them a little bit. So, tell us what kind of products do you typically educate folks on? Like what is
Mhm.
So I'll give you a synopsis of it, and then we'll break it down. The business model that I have is a brokerage business, and what that means to people that are just jumping into this business is that I have access to what we call institutional money, which is the big banks.
Yeah.
So then we have private money, which is individuals that are looking to throw their money out in the market because they want a return on it, which they get greater returns than them just leaving it in the bank.
Okay.
So the products that I work with and offer are fix and flips, which some people also know them as hard money. We'll talk about that. We talk commercial lending. We're going to talk about that as well. Acquiring land. So if you're looking at Georgia and you have a tract of 14 acres, 100 acres, and you're looking to develop it, and not only do you want to develop, but you want to build 400 houses. So we do what's called vertical as well. So I mean, we basically build from the ground up. So it's two types of loans we can discuss here shortly.
Okay.
And then we start talking, and then like the other thing that I focus on is SBA. And the SBA loans are great for individuals that are on that journey to becoming an entrepreneur. I'll talk about some of the programs that I have to offer. Because at the end of the day, in this game of lending, it's all about risk mitigation. Right.
Yeah.
And having the luxury of being able to be in both institutional and private allows me to move faster than most lenders. Again, if you just go to a business banker, there's a slew of different things that they have to go through, which I'm experienced as well. Because when I was at JP Morgan, we used to call it black, white, gray. So there's black and white, that which is their buy box, and then there's gray area.
Okay.
My business is heavily in the gray area because I have the luxury of presenting a case to the underwriting group and to the individuals that are lending this private money. And that's the name of the game, which we're going to talk about in a second here, how
Okay.
to set yourself up for success. Because at the end of the day, half of the obstacle for most people that are jumping into this business is they're going to the wrong lender.
Mm.
You might have the perfect deal, but what you might not know is that that lender is pulling away from that product because they think it's high risk. Now
Gotcha.
you get the decline letter and people just walk away and be like, well, I guess it's not going to work. And it doesn't work like that. But yeah, so, and then again, I have access to equipment. If you're talking like heavy equipment, if you're, construction company, to spas, dentist office, if they're looking to get a $30,000 spa chair, or they need two or three of them, it's a myriad of different things. And that's what makes it so sexy, is that, and that's why I always, my presentation, like I told Jerome, was like, anything that needs money,
Mhm.
let me know. Let me earn your business. Let's see what I can do. I'll take it to, the different groups that we have available to. And 9 out of 10 times we fund it. That's why I always tell people money is the least of your concern right now. We got to make sure that you have a viable deal. You have a viable business plan. There's nothing worse than getting money and then you don't know what you're going to do with it.
For sure. For sure.
So just to
Go on,
reiterate,
Jerome. Yeah, go ahead.
okay, just to reiterate, if I'm a newcomer in this business
Yep.
and I feel like I have an opportunity, when and what do I tell Jorge at this point?
So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper. Are you referring to like in the mortgage industry? Not mortgage, but like
Oh,
the real estate
multifamily.
spot?
Yeah, the multifamily. I feel like I
Perfect.
got to underwritten it. What do I tell Jorge and when do I go to Jorge?
So
yeah, perfect. So let me jump in and set the scene a little bit so we can give the folks
yes, sir.
the picture. So
I'm getting excited.
Exactly. So, all right. So looking around, called his broker. He sent me this stuff. It's 106 units. It's over in Atlanta MSA. Looks good. Numbers look fine to me. I've done my underwriting. And what do I do right now? Before I even say that, right? So I've already called my insurance agents, make sure their numbers are correct. I already called my real estate folks, make sure my numbers straight. Now I'm on to Jorge. I'm like, all right, Jorge, these are the numbers. What are you taking from here?
So I always appreciate a savvy investor, somebody that does their math. Whatever information you have, I take, but I have to go through our setup as well, which we have to kind of review, because at the end of the day, and the investor game, where somebody's CMA, which basically CMA is like they'll do a 1 mile radius. I've seen as much as 30-mile radiuses because they're trying to get the best comparables. And they're like, oh, these are the comps that I have. And I'm like, my guy, you're like 27 miles out. But so a CMA is important because it allows the individual to say, okay, hey, I have houses that sold in that are similar, which is very crucial. And this is what we have, but we have to do our own thing. So first things first is what I call like my discovery call is, what is the asset? And you've heard, and many people have heard this before. Where is it located? Where's it located? Where's it located? Because that has a lot to do with where we go from there. So we have this thing that we have to focus on, which are the class of building that we're talking about, or like the property. So there's this thing called Class A, Class B, and Class C. Now, it kind of follows like the grade pattern. So Class A are properties that are less than 15 years old. What that means for us as a lender, we call that a premium building because they tend to be where you can charge more for it. If we're talking about, renting and all these good stuff. Class B is anywhere from 15 years to 30 years that has been built. Now, it's a functional building, but there's some maintenance stuff in the background because it's an older building. It's like anything else.
Right.
Class C, just like the letter, right, is what we call below quality or just an average building. And these are 30 plus years.
This is the one where your teacher's kind of side-eye looking at you like, hey, you might not make it.
Hey, listen, I hope the bell curve is going to help you on this one. But the reason those classes are important is because it allows us to set that picture of like, okay, what are we working with? And, there's a Class D as well. And those are the ones where it's a challenging neighborhood. Like I have a gentleman that I spoke to yesterday. He's like, man, I got this great building. I'm looking to do this, this, and this. I was like, where's it located? And I know by the way he paused, he was like, well, and I was like, listen, because and that's the thing, you pick up and feel like, well, what do you mean? What's going on? Because I've seen that facial expression because your face will always give you away. He was like, oh, it's kind of like a half a mile from a federal prison. And I was just like,
okay.
Yeah. And I was like, tell me how did you even find this? And that's why I love about investors because it's like, oh, but it's a great deal. I'm getting it a hell of a discount. I'm like,
yeah, it's a reason why.
Yeah. So the classes is a very special conversation because it allows us to see the picture, which again, we could expand on that as well. And then we start talking about what the occupancy looks like. How is what we call the TTM or the trailing 12 months, showing you what here's the first thing that I want to say, and I want to be very clear and emphatic about this for any type of investor that's new, jumping in or whatever. You need to look at real estate as a business. You're buying a business. Once you look at it from that perspective, it's no longer just the asset. You're looking at it as a business. And what does that mean to you? It means that we need to look at the paperwork. We need to look at the numbers. What is the net operating income that's coming from this? What's the cap rate? Like all these different things, because now we can say, all right, DB, so based on what you have, this is what we can see. This is what we think is going to happen. But more importantly, what's your exit strategy? What's your execution plan? What do you want? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the thing I want you to understand, there's so many angles to this business. A Class A building is great. A Class B building is great. A Class C building is great. A Class D building is great. It all depends on what your strategy is. If your strategy is, I'm going to fix it up, I'm going to put some money on it, guess what? Now you move up to a Class C. Now you move up to a Class B. Now you get to charge more money. Other people just want to hold it. They just want to get guaranteed, income coming back. That's the Class A. They're just like, I don't care about what's going to happen. I don't care about the rate. I know that if I get my 10% back, I'm solid. So that's why, as an investor, you have to have your presentation down because you're selling me and I got to sell somebody else for it.
For sure.
Right. So the other thing that's very important as well are what we call sponsors. And we're going to talk about that as well, because I know we got 1 minute. And then the leverage. And again, I mentioned this already, is the exit strategy. What's your game plan? How are you looking to execute on it?
So you just covered, just a recap, you just covered the location. You're starting to get into the numbers and why we have to think of this as a business. And just before you even get back into it, I know for me personally, this is actually one of the reasons why I love multifamily. over residential. Not that you can't think of residential as a business. You certainly can. But I find that when you begin with residential in the very beginnings, you know, when you have one building, two building, you still sort of like my house, you know, like there's still a little bit of attachment. Even if you don't live in it, there's still a little bit of my house, my attachment to it. When you buy in a multifamily, you can't even think of it that way. Like there's no room for that. It all comes down to, okay, NOI, cap rate, location.
Yeah.
Is the insurance going to be enough? Is this going to be enough? What kind of tenant pool do I have? Like your mind just doesn't have the opportunity to even start doing that, you know, my blue wall in the bathroom kind of thinking, right? You just go straight to what are these numbers going to look like, you
No,
know?
you're right. You're right. I like what you said about it. It's a weird transition going from mine to this is too big to be mine, and your mind shifts and you treat it as such as a business. And the funny thing is, it's like, you know, Jerome, I met him at a networking event, but every week when I was back home in Houston, I would try to go to 3 to 2 events a week, and I try to be selective because you start seeing like it's almost like a get to the like a happy hour when my intent is I'm trying to make, solid connections.
I know
So that's
exactly
when
what you
I
mean. Yep.
so that's when I have to kind of like fall back. But I love seeing the novice, the newcomer, and they see the fix and flip as this is the way. And when I talk to them, I'm like, yes, it is. Because where you're at right now is not that next phase, right?
Right.
But then, like yourself, and you mentioned it's like, you got 3 in, you got 4 in, now you're 5, and you start seeing the level of grind for that 10K, 15K, and then you start doing the math. It's like, man, this took 6 months. You divide that 10K, man, that's only like $600-700. But then you hear somebody mention, it's like, oh man, I just got this apartment complex. Man, I made 1.5, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, what now?
All right.
And then you start seeing that there's levels to it, and that's the thing for me that what I love about it is no matter where you're at, you're in the right place.
I
That's
like
the
that.
name that's the
Yeah.
name of the game, because there's a quote, it's like, comparison is the death of joy. And if I'm looking at DB and he's like, oh, he's messing with multi and I'm still doing these little single family. No, because how you talk about your business and how you're
Right.
running it, you're talking yourself down, man. You're doing real estate.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But you get to a point when you realize, okay, I got this down. What's the next come up? Because you have to challenge yourself. It's just like a job. Every 2 years, you got to make moves. But then you get to the apartments and the multifamily. That's its own animal. You just said it. You got to think about the tenants. You got to think about this. You got to think about all these other factors. And then once you get that down, guess what the next move is? It's like, well, hold up. What's up with that storage facility over here?
Right. Right.
And people make fun of storage facility. Man, I'm telling people talk down to when I go to these events, and they're like, come on, man, that's a waste of time. Listen,
Man,
listen, man. You know what blew my mind
Stuff.
recently? Parking lots.
I
Straight
can see
parking lots.
parking lots. I can see it.
I didn't. I had a guy I met. It was in the gallery. I was just kind of like walking around, and we were just, you know how it goes. I think it's like the energy and what you put out there. Like you just draw people in, or you just walk into people. And we started talking, and he was just like, "Yeah, man, I'm talking to a realtor right now, and I'm looking for land." And that's what got me. I was like, "Well, what kind of land? What do you do?" He was like, "Man, well, I want to get a couple of parking lots." And I was like, "Man, come on, man, parking lots." And man, he was like, "Man, come to my office sometime, and I'll show you." And he started showing me the numbers. Man, it
Makes
blew my
sense.
mind.
Wow.
There's no maintenance to it. There's
No
nothing
man.
you have to worry about. You just you pay that person $10-20 an hour, whatever it is, with
Yeah.
that flag.
Yeah.
In any event, you
That's
beat
what
people
I
over
was
the head.
gonna say. Like, growing up in Jersey, you know, that Jersey City, Newark area, everywhere you went, you worried about parking. There wasn't any place you went where parking wasn't on your mind, right? So you just think about that, and those parking lots, there's always one there. And some of them, like, depending on the hour, whatever, you're gonna be paying. I mean, if you go to New York, that's a whole different ball game. I remember going
Listen,
to, we head out to New York. First of all, the parking lot, don't drive there with a big SUV because the parking lot was made for a mini. right? But somehow you're still gonna fit it in. It's the size of a mini, but they're gonna fit like 10 Tahoes in that spot. So yeah, I can see how, managing something, small square footage, but it can fit a lot of stuff in there. And now, they got the machines where you can raise up if you don't have like the story type setup. And then like you said, the maintenance, there's only one person there per shift. You don't really need more than that. Yeah, I can definitely see
Money
how
getters,
that'll
man.
work out. Yeah, yeah.
Incredible. Like, so this is my first time coming. I've been here before, but it was just work, so I really didn't get to walk around. I never realized you mentioned like parking and that type of stuff. So out here, they have this thing called like in and out parking. So like I remember the first time I stayed at the Millennium, which is right in front of where the World Trade Center was. And I was here for business, I was here for work, and I rented a car because I was like, I want to see Brooklyn, I want to see this, I want to see that. So I parked the car, not paying attention to it, took the car out, went around, came back, and then I get, because I was here for like 3 weeks or something like that, and I got like the statement, the parking was more than the room. And I got nervous. I was like, what's going on? They were like charging 120 a
Ooh.
day. And I was like, man,
Wow.
I was like, oh, you guys have an issue here. There's a typo. And they're like, no, you see how
No,
you
no.
left at this time and came back? And I was like, yeah, but I paid the money. He was like, no, you paid just to stay. Once
That's
you
Wow.
leave,
crazy.
so they call it like in and out parking. So, and then like now that I'm here a little bit longer, I'm walking the city and kind of sightseeing, and I'm talking to people. And I met this lady, she's like my age, she's a little bit older, and we were talking about, transportation. And I was like, well, do you drive? And she was like, I don't know how to drive. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know how to drive?
Oh yeah, you can
She was like, I
find
never
that
been.
like
I'm always in the
in
passenger.
the
I've
train,
never
something
Mm,
like that. Yeah,
exactly. And I, and
train
and from
taxis. Yep.
I'm from LA, man. You can't be out without a
right,
vehicle.
right,
In
right.
Houston, you can't be without. So that's the part that is it ties into the real estate thing, is because how I see things is from my perspective.
Mm,
But you're from Jersey, and you're in Baltimore. Like, it's a different perspective, and that's how this real estate game is. Where you see how I tied it back into it, where you're able to see business opportunities in places you never would have thought of.
For sure.
Like these storage facilities right now, that's where it's at. That's where it's at right now.
Yeah,
mm,
I see some people killing it. I saw recently someone post a deal. I think the return was like 2 point something X multiple.
mm.
AR was like
Man,
numbers that didn't even you would
it's
never
not
see
real.
on. It's like, okay, this is crazy.
There's a guy that I met, and he has two or three, but he's looking to get two more. And man, when I tell you, like, I am beyond thirsty over this dude, because I'm like, because you're talking anywhere from, it could be 15 to 20 mil,
Mm,
because they got to get the line, they got to go through the whole process and all this different thing, man. Listen, I'll be able to be okay for a little bit if I get that
Sure,
little taste of
sure.
that. But no, man, it's just I think the biggest thing for anyone that's interested, anybody in this business, you just got to put yourself out there, and you'll be surprised what you might learn that might lead you to your
mm.
next phase in your journey, which
Yeah,
is incredible, man. It's endless.
I believe that. Listen, let's jump back into Jerome's first question, which is taking us pretty much the whole
Yep, yep, yep,
um
yep, yep. My bad.
podcast because it's real detailed and you're giving us like a lot of stuff. So you started
Mm,
talking about, in terms of I come to you with this deal, 106 unit out in the Island MSA. You're looking at it, first thing you're looking at is location.
Yep.
You start looking at occupancy and it's all about the numbers for you. So where else are we right now?
The one thing that I wanted to talk about also that's very important is like what we call like sponsorships. And sponsors could be a person, it could be a team. And what that does for you is basically they handle all the aspects of the commercial real estate project on behalf of what we call the equity investor, being Jerome in this example. Now, here's why this is important. A sponsor brings experience to the conversation. What that does in the lending world, it appeases the lender because it's not Jerome's first deal.
Hmm.
It's DB's been in the business for 10, 15 years in partnership with Jerome. It's almost like a credit card. And when you put an authorized user, how they can benefit from your high credit score. Same concept. But the reason it's important is because, again, when you start talking about financing is all about mitigating risk. And if you're talking about me being new into this business, it's a high risk because we're talking about a couple of M's. And we're talking about if there's renovations, do you have a team for that? Do you know what you're looking to do? Or are you somebody who just watch HGTV and you're just like, I want to get into this business? So in the scheme of things, it's about the presentation. So the leverage for you is, oh no, I have an individual who's been in the business X amount of years. He's done multiple deals. So now they look at you with a little bit more at ease because remember, in this business, it's an asset-driven business. The property is where it's at. But at the end of the day, you got to bring something to the table, show like I have a team that's going to guide me through the process. Now, the sponsorship game is one of those things they want a little cut out of it because all they're really lending you is the knowledge. It's almost like sweat equity. They're like, well, what do I get out of it? So you kind of split a little money on that. But definitely worth it because as we were talking earlier, what you can learn from that individual is paramount. It's priceless. So you definitely got to make sure you got, your pen and paper. If you don't like pen and paper, man, you ask him if you could record the conversation because it will definitely pay dividends. And again, and the last thing I think I mentioned this as well is what is your game plan for the property? What is your exit strategy? What's the objective? Because again, we talked about different class buildings. It doesn't matter what class building you have. It depends on what your objective is with it. Because you can make a killing with a D class building because you're going to fix it up. And all of a sudden now you charge them more for it because that's what it is. Like one thing out here in New York that I've been seeing a lot of is like these rent control apartment complexes. I'm ignorant to that. So I've done some research on it and there are a couple of banks that are kind of going through some tough times because the objective was get these buildings to get so torn down with maintenance issues and all these different things. People leave. Now you can fix it up and you can skyrocket them.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's incredible to see the angles with it. But if that was you, if you were to say, hey, I'm getting this class D building, but here's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to do these upgrades and I'm going to increase the rent. Man, listen, whatever lender is salivating because they're going to be like, okay, cool. Because we know that this individual, that net operating is going to be good. Because what you're making, what you're doing, like it offsets each other. So they're ready for you to sign. They're like, well, how much do you need? We could just make this happen right now. But yeah.
Yeah, for some of those who've been listening to us for a while, in our word here, Jerome and I, we call that value add. So, when we're looking for a property, like you were saying before, if you're looking at a class A, chances are it's probably not going to be value add. Everything is already good to go, right? Versus, a B and C, that's when your value adds come in because you can come in and say, all right, these units, the next one across the street or wherever, is renting, excuse me, $200 more because they got, updated stuff. So I go and do the same thing and potentially I can come out and see the same, NOI increase. So yeah, value add is what we're looking for. If you got money and, your core investors coming with you are more looking for like what they call core, right? Then yeah, those folks are looking for just stable money, just a place to put their money, relax. They don't really need much, they just needed, a little something here.
We don't like to use the word guarantee, but that's kind of like the energy. They're like, we know,
right.
Yeah, we know what's going to happen here, right?
Pretty safe,
yeah, they don't want to take the risk in the stock market. So the next phase is the real estate game. Absolutely,
for sure.
My bad. I was just going to hit on the importance of it being a team sport in regards to having relationships with you and your sponsors, and not trying to get the whole pie. Even if you're getting a small piece of the pie, you got to look to play forever. At least that's what our business model is. So, and this is Umbo Lukanga quote that I kind of build our business off of is that you can get all you want out of life if you help as many people as you can get what they want out of life. So it's about investors, man. So making them feel comfortable, making them wealthy, and you'll reap those benefits.
That's a fact, man. That's a fact. I remember, I don't know where I heard it, but somebody says like if the only way you can get people that are like established to help you is you got to make them money. And then that's how you kind of tap into it. It's exactly what you just said. Yours is definitely more eloquent though. But at the end of the day, it's what's 10% of nothing. You trying to do all this on your own. What's your 10% of nothing, right? Like
Right.
you're not gonna get nothing. So I think if the individuals, because it's very important who your circle is, but if everybody has the growth mindset and looks at it as a unit instead of just like a deal, then it's like how many
Mm,
units can we do together to level up? But
Mm,
I agree with you 100% on that.
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I'll add a little bit to that. More recently, I had an opportunity to jump on a deal, and it's funny because the first thing I didn't think about, oh yeah, let me just go in this by myself, because at first thing I did was like, all right, let me call some folks who I know are in a similar position as me, interested in doing something similar to what I'm doing. And how can I come, how can I bring them in and share, 50%, 50/50 on a deal? And I didn't even realize I was actively doing that. I just knew I was, I know this guy. Let me call this guy. Let me call this guy, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
And from that end result, although the deal didn't go down, I've already built up this massive amount of people that know that when something comes, I can call them. I've already built up a few partners. So to what Jerome is saying, it's not always about, all right, how much can I take of this deal by myself, right?
mm,
If you consider bringing folks into stuff, they'll start to realize, oh, look, this guy's sharing. I didn't even ask him; he's sharing with me. Right.
yeah. And that's the craziest thing I realized. And Jorge, you hit on it earlier, is just that gatekeeper energy in this field is not healthy. And I haven't really experienced it that much, man. I've been just blown away how gracious people are with their knowledge and time in the multifamily space.
I love it. And I think what we were talking about as well is that I'm a big believer in like, like you're doing everything you can within your power, but you manifest like, look, every time I go to an event, I'm like, I'm gonna meet four solid people. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna talk to everybody. I'm gonna make a good relationship. But in this space of like you're mentioning, like people are showing you love, that's what you're putting out there.
Mm,
And we're not for everybody because there'll
Mm,
be occasion you might get somebody, you know what you do? You move to the side and keep it moving because that
right.
person's not going to stop the show. But the fact of the matter is when people are in a different level, you're not affecting their money.
Hmm.
You potentially can make them money. And that's where they're like,
Yeah.
come on, young buck,
come on.
come on, I
Yeah.
got you. And which is
Yeah.
again, I'm all about it because I think the ego, one of my mentors told me a long time ago, he's like, either your ego grows or your bank account grows. You got to make a choice. So it is what it
Nah, I
is.
I'm gonna
love
let that bank account grow.
it.
You're right about that.
Love
Yes,
it.
sir.
Put it on a t-shirt. Love
Hey,
For
let's get it,
sure.
baby.
Yeah, I like
Merge
that.
coming soon. Merge coming soon.
it.
Uh, Before we get out here, let me touch on one other thing that one other product that you offer, which is SBA. I'm a big proponent of starting small businesses.
Love it.
Even
Mm,
as we started conversation, started talking about plumbers and all the electricians and different trades, because definitely a good way to get going.
Yes.
And people put it to the side, people knock it, but man, they don't understand. When you really go in and as a business, man, there's money to be made there. So walk us through a little bit. Let's say similar to the multifamily. So I'm looking around on loopnet.com or whatever. I found some deal, some guys selling a business. Let's just say the business also has like maybe heavy equipment and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What do I do when it comes to funding? Like how do I approach you? What do I say to you?
So the beauty about it is it kind of follows the same game plan as like real estate, where we like to see what the numbers have, like and we call them like it's the trailing 12, it's a TTM, but it's like trailing 12 months. And it
mm,
basically is a snapshot of what the business has done.
mm,
And what that allows us to see is this like a failing business or is this a business that's stable with potential to grow?
Mm,
Because we want to return. When I say we, it's like the money wants to return on their investment.
for
But
sure.
here's the really good thing that I like about the program that I have access to is this. If you were to go to a standard institution, whatever bank, insert whatever bank that you go to, the first thing they're going to say is like, well, what have you done in the past?
Mm.
And instantly the conversation ends because you're like, well, I'm actually on this journey to become an entrepreneur.
Which is crazy, right? It's like going back to college again. I just graduated. I need my first job. Well, do you have experience? Well, no, but I want the job so I can have
Yeah.
experience.
And I always make this analogy. It's like credit. Everybody
Mm,
wants you to have credit, but they don't want to be the first one to give it to you. So
right.
it's this very interesting dichotomy that they have. But what I have leveraged on my side is that I have access to a program where, let's say John Smith is in this example looking to buy this business, a heavy equipment business, and he has a W-2. I can use his W-2 income, multiply it by 2x, and show that this is the potential growth for this business he's looking to acquire, thus allowing us to move the loan forward.
Oh, nice.
So the beauty about SBA, and I always, my conversation always goes like this, DB. It's always, hey, what do you do? Are you in real estate? Are you this? Or tell me about it. Well, what about small business? You think, because small business to me, that's why I like focusing on it, is because so many individuals have an idea, have a game plan, have thought about it, have been sitting on it, whatever it is, and they always think that, well, I don't got no money, I ain't got no bread, I don't got this, I don't got all these different things that aren't a factor because of these programs that people don't know about. And the reason I get so passionate about it is because you're just one business away from understanding, like, I could have been doing this years ago. I've been doing this for this company for 10, 15 years, making 30, 40, 50 racks. But now I'm just in this position where I'm like, I've invested all my time into it. I think I could do this on my own. And the answer is absolutely. So why not? Oh, well, I don't know about business, or I don't know about LLCs. Listen, that's the easy part. There's companies you can pay. You can Google it. But what about, I don't know about the money. I'm glad you brought that up, because let me educate you on it, because at the end of the day, I'm like, it has to be a viable business.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, if somebody's like, yeah, man, there's this Blockbuster down the street, I think if I could buy it, and it's just like, and then if you got younger people here, Blockbusters used to play these rent videos and all that. But the point that I'm
like
trying
rent
to
videos, what does that even mean?
What's a video? Yeah. Why won't you just stream it? We didn't have that, man. We had to wait there till 7 p.m. because that's when the return time was.
Man,
But
don't forget to rewind that, man.
the extra $3 fee. But the point that I'm trying to make with small business loans and that type of thing is, it's the same conversation. It's like, what is the business doing? What is the numbers looking like? What are you looking to do with it? Is it like a franchise setup, or is this a situation that you're just looking to step in and just maintain the same thing? And the conversation, once we get into that information, is very smooth. Now, the only thing about SBA is that it does take a little bit longer to fund.
Gotcha.
And that's because it's a longer process. So it's not a week and you get your funds. You're talking about from 30 to 45 days. Now, that's normal in institutional funds, but for, with hard money and all these different people, it's like, you can't fund in 72 hours. You can't fund in 24. I'm leaving. It's just like, all right, man, I get it, but it moves a little bit different. So my thing for anyone watching, or if you have a business that you're thinking about starting, if there's a business you're looking to buy, here's the other one. If you're a business and need working capital, we got that as well. If you're a business that's looking to expand, we got that. It's just anything that you think you're like, well, if I only had this much, if I had a line of credit, we have options for all of that. And I think the most important thing is, don't allow your limitations to dictate what your growth is. Like, you got to be out, you got to be able to ask people, you got to be able to do some research. And you got to just put yourself out there, man, because when I tell you, man, the money's out there, it's not a joke. Now, you might be running into situations where banks, like institutional funds, are pulling away from multifamily and commercial, and that's okay. Private money isn't.
Gotcha.
Hard money isn't. Now, it does come with a little bit of a higher interest rate, but at the end of the day, if your
The
business
numbers work,
plan,
right?
if it works, it works.
Yeah.
You got to be able to leverage other people's money.
No, I like that. I know this is, primarily real estate focused, and but whenever we have a business minded folk in the house, I always like to bring up SBA and small business, because I'm a firm believer in just business in general, and this syndication in real estate stuff that Jerome and I do, it's a business. But then there's also the small business that mom and pop that's around the corner that a lot of times people don't realize. You don't necessarily have to start everything from fresh, right? Because there's a lot of growing pain that comes with, starting a business from fresh and, hoping it survives, right? The majority of businesses obviously don't. We know statistics say they don't survive. So whenever you have the opportunity to, purchase a business that's already doing well, You know, whether it's a retiree, someone, you know, about to move down to Florida, they're tired of Houston heat, they're about to go to the Florida heat, you know, different, they want a different kind of heat, you know. That's
My
a good
man's digging today, boy. Who is digging?
You know, it's funny. It's actually not out here in DC area. It was like 90 degrees this past week. So
Oh
we getting some of
man,
that heat over here, you know.
the good
Listen,
old
man,
days.
I left home, which is in Houston, 2 weeks ago, and it was like that 105 with that humidity. I came out, I'm in the city, I'm in Manhattan right now, and it was like 90, 85. And the funny thing is people are like,
Crazy.
oh, it's so hot,
I
it's
know, right?
unbearable. And I'm looking at them like, man, you don't
This
even
is
know.
not
The
You don't
triple
even know.
digits all month,
Yeah,
man.
man.
It's
And I used to
crazy.
live in Phoenix, Arizona, and you know,
Oh
is
man.
that
Oof.
so? I've had the dry heat and the humidity, and I'll tell you one
Mm.
thing: dry heat wins every single time.
Mm.
Because you could be in the shade and you're still good. In
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Houston, it don't matter
Right.
where you're at. That
they
humidity will
get you.
disrespect
It's
whatever you got going on, man. That's a fact.
Oh
oh
man,
man.
man.
Listen,
So
I appreciate you coming by, Drum.
for
You got
sure,
anything
man.
else for our man? No?
Oh no, just got to hit him with that one question.
Okay.
Again, this is the Take Ownership podcast.
Yes, sir.
So Jorge, we just want to know. The people want to know, what do you take ownership of?
So, like most people, every single month, Navy Federal sends me a letter and they say they want a payment for this house that I just bought a year ago. Um, and I don't know why. Like I just paid it last month, and it seems like it comes every single month. They say it's going to be for 30 years.
Congratulations, by the
Yeah.
way, on that. Yeah.
Thank you. But the reason I say that is because, like, in my type of business is strictly commission. Like you eat what you hunt. And right now in the commercial space and the multifamily space, there is a little bit of pullback because of the rate hikes and all these uncontrollables. And the unfortunate part is that, in any industry, people start believing the hype and they're like, no, this is not a good
Mm,
time.
Mm.
So for me, it slowed down. And I was just like, man, like, I got to make sure I'm taking care of the fam. I got to make sure I'm doing these different things. When I was with JP Morgan, my accounts were, which was really odd. It was New York, Seattle, and California, and a little bit of Texas. So I have relationships in New York that have been hitting me up for, different like lending things, opportunities. The drawback is in New York, it's a face-to-face city. Like they want to see you,
Yeah.
they want to go to dinner. They want to
Yeah.
feel you first.
mhm,
So 2 weeks ago, booked a flight, got a hotel,
Mm.
and where I'm at right now, I'm in a space where, like, right now, what I'm doing for 12 hours, going through that Rolodex, making calls, hitting blocks. There's a slew of, like, right now, if you look
mhm,
at, this is not a screensaver. This is the city right here.
For sure.
Um,
mhm,
there's a lot of buildings with vacancies
mhm.
signs on the front. There's a lot of buildings where, you got people saying, like, for rent and all these different things. All that is to me is an opportunity
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
because there's a pain point there. And that pain point is, I see the 9 minutes. The pain point is either their loans are coming up and they're struggling to figure out what they're going to do next, or they need to figure out if they're going to sell, if whatever the
Mhm,
situation is. But either way, either somebody's going to need financing. So that means I need to build relationships with like a commercial real estate. It doesn't matter who it is. Whoever it is, they're going to get it. Like
Yeah.
we're going to have a conversation. So that's what I'm doing out here, man. My game plan is to
yeah,
be here till like the end of December. Uh, make some connections and try to lock these deals in because if I don't, somebody else will.
I like that. I
yeah.
like that hustle, man.
Oh,
Um,
real man.
and
Yeah.
but plus, man, like New York is incredible, man. Like
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't live out here because I'm a tropical person. So I'm gonna
Mhm.
see how this wintertime is gonna be. But yeah, but I bought a, let's say I just bought a coat just in case because I already know. Listen, man, like I'm missing this up here. Like it's too much. It's too much. But for me what I would say to anybody listening is that understanding that you have the power within you to
Mhm,
dictate how you want to operate. And if you feel that it's too hard, then that means you're comfortable with your situation,
Mm.
and
mhm.
that means you can't complain about it.
I like
You-
that. I like that. Listen, man, really appreciate you coming down, Jorge. You know, hopefully this won't be the last.
No,
Definitely want to.
actually, I was gonna say, man, if there's any times where there's like segments or and if there's like particular products you're talking about, man, we could talk about, you know, the private sector. We can
Yeah,
talk
man.
about DSCRs, whatever. So then people can kind of understand that, yeah, it seems like difficult, but once you start seeing the breakdown, it's just like
Hmm.
the fix and flips. It's just
Yeah.
the variations are a little bit different. And you mentioned like NOI and PIT, all these different things are just acronyms.
Yeah.
Yeah, learn the
That's all
language.
it is. Yeah, it's just a
Hmm.
different language.
Yeah.
It's very esoteric, and they do that to keep people out. But once you understand it, it's like a building system. And once you start
Hmm.
building, you're like, oh, I heard that before.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, cool, cool.
I
Yeah.
remember when I started getting into this and someone mentioned agency debt, and I was like, what does that mean? Oh, it's Fannie and Freddie's. Like, why didn't you just say that? Right? Like,
Same here.
like,
Same here.
but again, it's one of those things, right? Whether it's keeping you out or just trying to formulate something
Hmm.
that someone else might think, oh, this must be, it's agency debt. What is that? I can't touch that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely important. I like where your mind is at. We'll definitely have to connect and maybe even have a segment like you were saying where we educate the folks on a lot of these products, because the reality is that's really what it is, right? Being able to be educated and more important than education, being able to follow up on that education. So
Yeah,
yeah.
like it's what is it? What's the purpose of education? And that's to take action.
Mm,
And if you don't, then you're just entertaining yourself.
for sure.
And so the last thing I definitely would like to say is like building a strong network is important. So any individual that that's listening, if you're in a position where you're thinking you want to step into it, if you have a deal that you're looking to finance, if it's a fix and flip, if it's a commercial, whatever it is, I work for a group called Capital Act, so I'll give the information so that way you guys have access to it.
For
But
sure.
there's no such thing as a silly question. There's no such thing as like, you're wasting time. Like, no, you're in a journey. Let's help you get there, because all I'm going to do is build you up so we can have a relationship. So any deal that comes up, you'll think about me first. And
For
then
sure.
at the end of the day is I got to compete for the business, but all I want is an opportunity to compete
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and to
I
show and
like I
to,
like that, man, because we started. I know we're about to get off, but we started this conversation and we're talking about how people don't really get to see the beginnings of stuff, right? They see
Hmm.
the glimmer and the end results, but the reality is, even as this market is shifting, right? You're still grinding, right? You're not just sitting back, in Houston or in the tropics somewhere, just sitting back with your feet up, right? You're
no.
still on the grind. You still making things happen. You still putting in work. And some folks really don't see that, or maybe sometimes they do, but they choose to be blind, right? Because
Hmm.
sometimes it's easier to be ignorant of the realities than to sort of face them. So really
You
appreciate that.
dropping bars over here, man. I like that one. They choose to be blind. But what was there's a author, his name was Iceberg Slim, and I know he has an interesting
Hmm.
background, but he said he had a quote that says a chump would rather have what is it, a ugly truth instead of no a beautiful lie instead of the ugly truth.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and the ugly truth is that if you don't put in the work,
Hmm.
nothing's gonna change.
Yep.
And it's easier to be like, oh, next year, I'll do it
Yeah.
next year. Listen, I've been doing this since back when I had hair. You know what I'm saying? So like that time flies too fast, and
It
Yeah.
does, man.
fortune favors the bold, man. So if you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it, take action. Call the team up, man. If you can find me, we'll connect, and I'll answer any questions that I can and get you on that journey.
Appreciate
Appreciate
that,
it.
man. Listen, we'll drop Jorge's details in the description so you can hit him up. Drop mine and drums as well so you can hit us up.
For sure.
As always, man, thanks for staying with us. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you all.
Listen,
Peace.
man, it's been a pleasure.
For sure.